What's up, everybody? It's Chad. We're back again with another episode of Ask Chad Grassy Logic. Today, I'm here with my friend Shay. Thank you so much.
Hi, guys. Super excited to be here.
We just went on like a 30-minute, side quest conversation with me here and Gino, and yeah, we're finally starting the show. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. We have a 2-week special starting today and next week with Shay. She's going to be joining us with some great conversations on parenting, on breastfeeding and stuff like that. But we're going to start from the beginning almost, and then we're going to work our way down. So yeah, and we were talking before, we think 2 weeks is perfect when you get into like the 4, the 6, the 8, part, kind of series, and it starts to get a little bit too much. So I kind of figured this would be great, and we don't really get to have as many medical professionals on the show as I would like. So whenever we have that chance and opportunity, I'm going to run with it. So thank you so much for joining me today.
I am super happy to be here. This has been on my list forever. I have wanted to get on here and be able to do something like this for you guys for a long time. So thank you for having me, for the opportunity. But yes, my name is Shay Carrillo. I have been a nurse for about 15 years now. I am now a doula. I work in the birth space. I'm also a birth assistant and lactation counselor. I have been working in the cannabis space since 2020 when I became a cannabis nurse. And over the past few years, it's just kind of evolved as time has gone on. And I found myself about 2 years ago coming back into the birth space and really seeing what cannabis was starting to look like. We were starting to actually get some real data that's coming out, unfortunately. And as we move forward, please know that, as always, this is not medical advice. This is not anything to take to a doctor and say, well, I heard and everything, blah, blah, blah. It's also brand new. We're moving from really limited information, unfortunately, but we're getting much more evidence-based practices than we have before. We're getting a lot of stuff coming out of countries around the world, and it's really exciting because what we're seeing is very contradictory to the stuff that we've heard over the past few years, and the really fearful data and stuff we're seeing is maybe not as valid as we were once told. And that's super exciting.
No, it is, because there's so much stigma stuck on cannabis still, and we live it every day. That having some kind of solid evidence is always helpful. Especially when it comes to something like this, because I've had actually right after the meeting I had with you a couple weeks ago, that cool thing you had, I sent one of my best friends some information. She just got done breastfeeding her daughter, and so she was wasn't able to use cannabis for 18 months because she was under a different assumption, but no one really knew until a couple weeks ago, really a couple months ago, with this new study that came out and everything. But before we dig into the nitty gritty of this, let's get everybody an intro of who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff. So you gave us a simple rundown and everything, and you started in the cannabis industry in 2020. But really, what drove you to cannabis in the first place before 2020? Have you been a cannabis advocate, this whole time?
The whole time. So I came from a cannabis family, always had seen cannabis use, was very destigmatized in my household. And as I moved into medical, I came from a very clinical place, but medical cannabis had a place pretty regularly from when I came in, because it's been only about 15 years that I've been a nurse. So 2010, the conversations had already started. We were seeing it being used in hospice, and hospice was one of my passions. I did a lot of death care work, and that was really my first engagement with cannabis in a medical sense. And I fell in love with the model that we were seeing with cannabis of this holistic care and seeing care from a whole person aspect. And this was not something we were seeing with other clinicals. So I had been drawn to it for many years. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of opportunities, right? Like, it would come up in hospice. My licensure at the time, I couldn't work at a high enough licensure to prescribe cannabis or anything. So I was still very much at the mercy of what was happening with providers. But I got to really see the good in cannabis, not just in the hospice scenario. We started to open up with having pain management patients. Then we started seeing a little bit more in my home health setting of people who were using it recreationally to treat pain, to treat anxiety, to treat depression. So when I came into the home health setting around 2013, I really started seeing it more because people were using it in their home as is their right. So I had to learn how to adjust to people using marijuana in their home and this being part of their routine. How does it interact with their medications? How do I now navigate doctors? And I fell in love with the education. And that's really where it took off. And so now I'm operating, I have a private business that I do consulting and everything out of, but I am operating a nonprofit.
Awesome.
To really get some of this education out. This is my passion. Cannabis-wise, we have used a nonprofit called Birth and Babes. We are just getting off the ground. We have approved at our nonprofit status. We are, everybody cross your fingers, working on getting all those next steps for 501c3s.
Congrats.
And as we move on through that, that'll be the concentration, is to really make sure this cannabis education is available, is accurate, is not just evidence-based, but empowerment-based.
Yes.
Because informed decision-making is every mom's right, and every situation is different.
Yeah,
so this is something we really want to push with that, and being able to not just educate moms, but educate providers, educate dispensaries. We were really lucky that the Department of Health is aware of what we're doing, and they do support what we're doing. They have met with us already. It's huge.
That is huge.
We were very nervous when they reached out to us at first to say they wanted to talk, and very much were concerned we were in trouble. But once we were able to share what we were doing and really show the information that we were giving, it was all support, and really comes from a place of harm reduction. Yeah. Which I think is important to mention, that it is a place of harm reduction, because nothing is without its harm. Any medication, and cannabis is a medication. Yeah. It commands that same respect. It demands the same respect. And so it's all that informed decision making.
Yeah. Even drinking too much water can do harm to your body.
Exactly. Yeah, Eating the wrong foods, having too much salt, all these things can do the same thing. Yeah. So as long as we know what we're doing and we're getting correct information that is not fear-based, that is not inflammatory, where somebody can actually sit with this information and make a decision that's right for them and their babies.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great that you guys are really pushing, because there's so much misinformation out there, and there's so much assumptions out there too, that people say, well, I did this and this with cannabis, I did this for years, so that means this. And like, it could be something else within their life that, did it too.
Contributed, exactly.
Yeah. So they're taking this is my personal experience, so I'm going to apply it to everything kind of thing is really dangerous. And I try to tell people, now this works for me, so you need to figure out what works for you, but this is what I like to do. And I try to make sure I tell people that, hey, maybe different for you, the way you do it, but this is how I do it. And if you want to take that and adapt to however you want, by all means. But I don't want people to think that I'm telling them this is exactly what because there's so much we don't know about cannabis.
It's so individualized. Yeah. We know cannabis is such an individual medication. Yes. And that's why it's important to be not only having these conversations, but having these conversations with people who are providing care. Because when people are unsure, who are they going to? They're going to a provider. Yeah. And who's the provider telling them to go to? The dispensary. And that's really scary, because these, those of us that work in dispensaries may not be trained to these big medical standards. 100%. This might be someone's job at 21 years old who's just happy to have a job and is not really up to date on some of this information. So we're spreading more misinformation this way. We're spreading bad advice, and it's just not the way to go. So we really needed to find a way to bridge that gap and make the information available, non-judgmental, and make it, again, in a way that was harm reduction based, that was empowerment based, for people to really be able to confidently use their cannabis in pregnancy and be able to say, yes, this is the choice I made, and yes, it's the right choice for me, because that stigma shouldn't be there.
100%. And while we're on the conversation, I guess we'll dig into it now that we got a really good background and grasp of, everything. So let's talk about, the pregnancy. We'll start from the beginning, like I said, where your parenting journey begins, when you find out this whole thing. So conception, there we go. We'll start. So when is a good time for a woman to lay off using her cannabis while pregnant, or even at the beginning? What are we looking at here?
So really, before we even talk about how to pull back or anything, we want to talk about why we're using.
Perfect.
Is this something you're using for a mental health reason? Are you managing a pain thing that, with pregnancy, pain is going to increase, your body's going to change. So is that something we need to keep in mind? Are you using it for sleep? Are you just using it recreationally? That's still a different conversation. Yeah. There's a very valid reason for using it culturally and spiritually as well. So that's something I like to do first, is have a conversation about why are we using cannabis? Because generally it's to treat something. Yeah. We know this even when we talk to patients or people who are using for recreational purposes, they're usually still treating something in the end. So really honing in on that, we can generally have conversations where we don't have to pull back on cannabis. We can eliminate the psychoactive component.
Got it. Yeah.
Most pregnancies, there's really no need for anything that's psychoactive. There are cases, especially when we're looking at people who have high nausea experiences, the hyperemesis. The THC has a proven benefit there. And we can talk about that with moms who choose to vape and be able to get microdosing that way. But in general, we can do a lot of work with CBD.
Yes.
And CBG and CBN and really using these cannabinoid families. So early in pregnancy, as early as you find out, start looking, start doing that research, reach out to somebody like me or some of our midwives, our local midwives and doulas who support this work, and start having those conversations about, this is why I'm using it. This is why I'm worried about stopping. What are safe ways I can continue, or what are some alternates?
Yeah.
And I think it's really, again, just having that conversation.
Yeah.
There doesn't have to be a bunch of fear around stop, abstinence only, you're doing it wrong, and if you continue, you're a bad mom.
Yeah, yeah.
Not true.
Yeah. Because you don't have to smoke it.
Absolutely.
We're so advanced these days that, we don't have to combust the plant to consume it.
There's so many options. We have so many options of microdosing and tincture, tiny doses. We have topicals. I've seen inhalants now.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the aerosols and things. So we can figure it out.
Yeah.
Almost always. Any mom or birthing parent who's needing that support, we can figure it out. And there's going to be a safe way, but that's just it. Especially with state laws and the risk of testing positive, and having CPS come in, and we can have a conversation about what CARA is and the CARA Act that started with all of that. CPS is still going to generally show up. So we can also have conversations about how to avoid that and come from a place of empowerment.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
again, break that stigma and come from a place of strength-based, empowerment-based decision making, knowing that you have that power.
Yeah, 100%. And it's your kid, your life, your body, and you want to have the most healthy child, but you also want to be able to cope with your pregnancy at the same time. I've had friends who told me she had a doctor one time. She lived in Mexico for a while, and she was a cannabis user before. And during her pregnancy, she had stopped. And the doctor told her, you need to smoke some weed because you're not eating. Like, your daughter's like starving you and you're going to die. He was like, and she told me that, she's like, my daughter's pretty much killing me. Like, I wasn't eating and, whatever. And so the doctor told me, you need to smoke some weed. And she said, I gained more weight. My baby gained weight, and, things got better.
Pregnancy is overall healthier.
Exactly.
This is, again, an individualized approach. A doctor recognized that, again, he's not out here prescribing it for everybody, but recognized her history and said, this is something your body needs to keep you and your baby safe. And this is the kind of care that we look forward to having here in the US. Someday we'll get to that place where it's that individualized and that important to a doctor to see the success of not just mom, but baby as well. And doing that from an empowered place.
Yeah, exactly. We've taken away the power of, the individual so much that, it's almost thickening,
it's really hard.
Yeah. And it's hard for women out there too, because you guys are carrying the baby and then you're carrying all this other risk along with it too, the CPS getting called if you eat the wrong or use the wrong thing, and that's not really fair. We're in a society where there's so many different medications out there and so many more harmful ones aside of cannabis that they're worrying about the wrong thing. There's times where the regular medication you get from the doctor is worse than what you could be doing with even smoking cannabis, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not condoning people smoke, whatever, but sometimes it is worse, you're better off doing the smoking cannabis thing than you are taking that medication.
Some of these medications.
Exactly.
And we don't have providers who are as comfortable having that conversation. We have midwives who are starting to get a little more educated and things. And again, I do encourage, if you are pregnant and watching this and having issues with your provider, finding a midwife over a provider if possible, because you have a little bit more room in these conversations. And it can make a big difference for your own self-advocacy a little bit, to feel that empowerment of being able to say, hey, I want better for myself and I want to feel heard.
Yeah.
Again, not a size all fits for everybody. If we're talking high-risk pregnancies, we're talking multiples and stuff, these are conversations we need to have with a professional. And again, a place where I can help and have those. But back to that, it's individual, right? It's back to, we need to stop these blanket assessments from studies done 40 years ago that have not been updated.
And have not been restudied.
Yeah. And now that we're doing restudies, show very contradicting data and stuff. So we have a lot of work to just move forward in a really positive way.
100%. And I say this all the time. Gino and I will go through studies and stuff. On the show, and there's times where I'm like, well, this data came from 1980, and they followed it from now. So I don't know how they've collected this data throughout time. So
they don't.
Yeah, exactly. And
they don't.
Being my background in the military was intel. We did a lot of analysis. And you're only as accurate as you collect. So if you don't collect the information correctly, your analysis is going to be incorrect.
Right.
And so that's what happens a lot of time with these old studies is the data was collected very incorrect, and it was not used in a very scientific method way or.
No, there was a lot of bias, a lot of discrimination, and we're still seeing that. The U.S.'s data is very spotty depending on who does it, depending on who's funding it. We see a lot of discrepancies. We had the most recent one out of Ann Arbor, Michigan that showed there was no real documentable cognitive decline in infants with exposure and pregnancy. And they're not giving that study a lot of momentum, even though we had 2 other studies out of India and England that kind of showed the same thing.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get that accurate information because, again, there's so much bias. There's so much push. And I don't know if you're aware of this, if you go and look at some of these studies for CBD and things like that, they come from like Johnson & Johnson, Eli Lilly. So they're already coming from a place that's not really rooting for totally valid data.
Yeah.
Or it's coming from religious-based entities, which is another bias. So it's been a little hard to find stuff that way. So I pay a lot of money to get information from outside of the U.S. and play for journals. So if that's something you ever need to, we can always get that on. But
definitely,
it's been a burden. It's hard to find that research so that we can come from an evidence-based, really informed background of safety as well as empowerment.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's just unfortunate our government, went the route they went. And even now with Schedule 3, it's been a whole mess.
And what's going to come of that?
Exactly. Just another mess. And that's what I'm afraid of. Don't get me wrong. There's people that are cheering it on and, I let them have their moment or whatever. But, there's so much unknown, and, I know the government. I worked for the government, and I know how they are and how they work.
Right.
So when the Schedule 3 thing came up, I told everybody they're not going to make the whole plant Schedule 3. I hope you guys know that. They're like,
absolutely not.
What do you mean? And I'm like, they did it with hemp. They separated it by definition. That's all they did. They gave you a 0.3 limit of where it is now hemp under that, and everything else is cannabis.
And they made up these obscure rules, and they did all this weird stuff, and they'll just continue to do the same and make it more restrictive with more titles.
Yeah, exactly. And there's all these arbitrary numbers and stuff. Even the 0.3% THC for hemp is arbitrary to start out with. Right. They cited a scientist to use that, but it was an arbitrary number that he came up with to give a standard.
One scientist. This has not been a repeatable thing. We're not having this in multiple studies where we see it as a consistent control.
Exactly. So there's a lot that needs to change on our government front before we start seeing some real positive. Because we have these big corporations that have a lot of money in it, but the government's the one that's really in charge of this process. And when you put those two together, you get what we kind of have right now. Exactly. And that's unfortunate. But I'm glad there's people like you really doing the work, going out there, looking for the information. I mean, paying for study information, that's huge. That's telling that you're really motivated in this, you're ready to, really work, because not many people would pay for a study, let alone, something that confirms what you already kind of know.
Right. I'm very lucky that I've been able to have access to these, and I have amazing colleagues across the country who are able to get access to this information and share it and have a network. It's a small network, but we're out there. Yeah. And, cannabis and psychedelic work is starting to really ramp up. Yeah. So we're starting to, ideally the next 5 years are just not going to look the same. We're going to have so much more decriminalization. We're going to have much more study and appropriate data available. I'm just really excited. Me too. Things are going on. It's rough right now, and it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but I'm really excited for the momentum we are getting and how receptive providers have been. Really? I will say, Crucis, it has been surprising how many of the doctors, knowing that there is starting to be people who understand cannabis and are willing to work with moms and birthing people that are wanting to use, there is support. I think it's a place of fear that even the doctors come from. Got it. Yeah. Not knowing and not being trained and having their own abstinence-only fear teaching in medical school, and then that being perpetuated throughout their career. I think they're open to it and just don't know how to go. That makes sense. I was reading something before the show today on the VA.
because the VA, they can't prescribe us cannabis, they can't do the card and everything. And to be honest, a lot of them don't have the proper education. What they actually did is they started giving them educational booklets for the doctors and everything through the VA on how to go about it. But the problem about it is a lot of it is based on caution versus actual medicine. They're cautioning you on what this can do versus, well, this is what the science says and this, that, and it's a step, but is it the step in the right direction we really need? You know what I mean?
Because again, the information they're getting, what is the quality?
Yeah.
And really what is the quantity?
Yeah, exactly.
Are they getting this limited, fear-based, really only, they're not even parameters. It's really just the negative side. We're not seeing anything in there talking about, this is where we're seeing successful work.
Yeah.
There's no successful parameters.
Yeah.
And that's really frustrating.
No, it is 100%, and it's frustrating, especially being a parent in the situations of, being a new parent on top of that, not knowing what you're doing.
Yep.
Don't get me wrong, no parent knows what they're doing.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
First kid.
I didn't realize that until I got older. My parents have no clue what they're doing. I don't think anybody knows what they're doing. And
nobody knew.
Yeah, no one knows what the hell's going on, and that's okay. But, at least to have the support is huge, to make your own decisions and choices, because you shouldn't have to suffer for 9 months. You really shouldn't. Don't get me wrong, you're already sacrificing a lot of what your body is and everything for this child. You at least have some kind of comfortability, with it.
Well, exactly. And especially what we do know about cannabis, right? If someone is a using person, a medical patient, and they're using higher amounts, they get pregnant, we take their THC, what's going to happen? We're going to have an endocannabinoid crash.
Yeah.
And we're going to have symptoms of things that are going to mimic autoimmune issues. They're going to be treated. They're going to require more medications, more interventions. Now we're seeing distress issues, all of which could be avoided if we have a conversation around the cannabis intake.
Yeah.
Again, knowing that we don't have to have the psychoactive component. And I think that's a big piece too, is there's also this assumption that it has to contain the THC for it to work, or that providers believe that there's no difference. Yeah. And that's unfortunate because they do not separate the studies of cannabis. They don't do independent CBD studies.
And that's one thing that I've noticed too, and we've mentioned it here on the show a lot, is, they will say the dangers of THC, or THC does this. I'm like, well, they're only studying THC. They didn't study anything else within that plant, the CBG, CBN, THCV, whatever else, whatever is in that plant. Or even the terps, the terpenes and the
flavonoids. They are not talking about any of this. It's all the THC. And so when we go to look for the studies to say, hey, the CBD might be safe, we can't even find anything like that. There's one independent study out of Australia. I will share you the link, so it's something we can share with everybody, just to kind of show it's one of the few that I found that's free.
Right.
But they are experimenting with putting the non-psychoactive cannabinoids in formula and in breast milk for babies that are in the NICU, and they are seeing great results.
Really?
Because what do cannabinoids do? But, boost up our homeostasis and stuff. So they see better blood sugars. They see better body temperatures. They're eating better. They're gaining their weight better.
Good.
They're not burning through as much of what's called their brown fat, which is a big concern with babies when they first are born. They're retaining more of that, which can lead to way healthier outcomes the first 5 years of life.
Yeah.
And so that's a big deal. And that's cannabis study, but it's CBD only.
Yeah.
And that's an exceptionally rare study to come across anyway. But just that study alone, what we could do, knowing how successful just cannabinoids were in littles.
Exactly. I mean, moms could even benefit from CBN helping them sleep, or during the day, CBG helping them get going and everything.
Get through that pain.
Exactly.
Things like that. Using topicals, being able to manage their pain in a way that also keeps them out of the doctor's office and out of the hospital.
Yeah, 100%. And, keeps them away from the pharmaceuticals that we know are dangerous, that you shouldn't be using.
We know these conversations are starting to happen too around really limiting your pain, things like that. Another common one is ondansetron or Zofran.
Yeah.
It comes with a black box warning. Deadly in pregnancy, we don't want to mess with it. What is the most prescribed pregnancy medication? Zofran.
Ooh.
Because it's for throwing up.
Yeah.
It's your nausea vomiting medicine.
Yeah.
So again, why is this our first line with a black box warning for pregnant women, but we're not even having a conversation around what CBD or cannabis could do for the same diagnosis?
Yeah, 100%. And, I'm glad that we're having this conversation so that way it can continue. It starts with this conversation and of course, the work that you do and everything, the fighting that you do.
And I want the questions. I cannot wait to the comments. I want the questions. I want the accusations. I want all of it because it gives me a chance to really answer questions at a level and meet people where they're at and say, yes, this is where you need to be, or no, this is not where you need to be, and let's talk about why.
Yeah, definitely. And those are conversations that need to happen.
And this is, I think, the thing too, is people that use cannabis are not stupid.
Yeah, of course.
They are capable of having these decisions and informed decision. I think there's a stigma that comes from especially the medical world that stoners are stoners, right? They don't think the same. They're a little slower. No, this is not the case. We know that intellectually that's not the case. And we know that smoking pot does not cause that cognitive decline.
Yeah.
A study that was debunked about that anyway.
Yeah.
This is somewhere that we have so much room for improvement, so much room for conversation in the community as well. And I welcome that. I want it. I want everybody to really engage for this, because it will be the community that answers first.
100%, and these are the conversations that are sometimes the most important within the industry, because we're so close to it. And people are so passionate, versus the person who may know a little bit about cannabis, doesn't really, like the conversation needs to happen with those people. They need to be educated, but sometimes starting here is like the really important part, because they're kind of picking away at a certain way someone who doesn't know wouldn't. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, like someone that's not from cannabis, they're not going to know certain things that we know, or nuances.
Right.
They're just going to assume, well, what are you going to do is smoke? And someone who uses cannabis, oh, are you guys going to be pushing for edibles? Like, what is this?
Other options.
Yes, exactly.
That there's other, and I think that's that misconception too. Everything's smoking, everything's vaping. We're not talking about any of these other low dose micro methods that are out here.
Yeah, exactly. Or even microdosing. Microdosing is huge. And I've told you guys about this many times, the wonders of microdosing, especially in a medical application sense. It's game breaking for certain people. I try to microdose too. So that way, one, I'm not over consuming my cannabis and smoking too much. And two,
get tasks done.
Exactly. My tolerance doesn't get so high too. And I'm, having all those issues. But it's also more, in my opinion, like more medicinal for me. Like when I'm too stressed, whatever, do the microdose, versus huge bomb rips and trying to just get, faded to this and that. We get the moment of clear, like just clear mind, not foggy, stoned mind, where I'm just like, just out of it.
Bingo. And when we're talking about women who are consuming while they're pregnant, having met these women and working with them, I have never in my career met a pregnant woman who is doing cannabis so they can be like, I just want to be out of my high mind 24/7 so that I don't have to deal with. Like, this is not what the conversations we're having. Yeah. Nobody is out here to misuse the plant.
100%.
They're here because the plant has helped them. They're looking for relief. And we know that this is the most natural route. Yeah. It's been being used for years.
I was going to say,
we also live here. The indigenous application of cannabis is also something that comes to the discussion a lot, and how important it is that the cultural and spiritual significance of the plant remain intact, especially for people who are birthing, knowing that this is something that they are entitled to. We aren't stepping on the church's toes. We aren't stepping on other spiritual practices' toes and saying, hey, this is inappropriate, you can't. And why should cannabis be treated differently? This is something that is a sacred plant, a sacred space, a sacred medicine, and being used in a sacred way.
100%. And I was going to bring that up. We've been using cannabis not for just pregnancy, for many other things for many, many, many years. Before these, huge prescription companies started coming in and, started pushing the pills. I mean, before the turn of the century, every doctor had cannabis in his bag.
Absolutely.
Heroin too, but heroin was in there too, but
don't suggest.
We don't suggest that one, but they did have cannabis extract inside of their bag. It wasn't flour; it was cannabis extract. And that's one thing that, really blew my mind when I learned that years ago. And I was like, well, what made them stop? What the fuck? I get heroin and cocaine. Right. But, why cannabis? We're not even at one death with this. What's going on? Why the huge disparity? And it got worse, because women that needed it now, and it's shitty because women had used it for many, many years. Right. This was without issue.
People. This was considered women's medicine. Cannabis was so core to so much of midwifery and a lot of the birth spaces, women's health in general. And it was all just kind of part of that prohibition slap when we lost everything and it all hit at the same time. And unfortunately, it was very motivated by a lot of the border things. A lot of the Mexican-American War had a lot of impact on the cannabis exchange and everything. That's where we get marijuana and everything. But that being said, I can see it coming back in that way, where doctors are kind of asking the same question you are. Why was this all of a sudden changed? Why? I think they're starting to notice that too.
That's good.
And I like hearing that.
That's good to hear.
In the medical community.
I like the open-minded doctors who are willing to go out of their way to learn. When we were first legalizing cannabis, there was this one doctor, he would show up, this Indian guy. And I just remember him because he would always show up. And at first he was kind of a dick because he didn't know anything. Yeah, he was kind of a dick because he didn't know anything. He was like, so what do you do when you're high? Do you just eat snacks? And so very calmly and not like an asshole, I educated him. I said, no, this and this and this and this. I was in Iraq, blah, blah, blah. You know, this person, this, you know, this and that. And you could see his gears moving. He goes, oh, I'm being a dick, you know? And so he kept showing up to different events and different expos. And I was like, this guy's going to slowly become a cannabis pro dude. And like, I haven't seen him in years. I don't know what happened to him, or maybe he moved to another state. Yeah. But I give him kudos. You know, he was kind of a dick at first because he just was uneducated, you know, but he came around and I could tell. And I think he was fighting it a lot of the time, you know, like he didn't want to. Yeah, it is, especially when you have to admit you were wrong. You know, like that's, for some people, that's like really hard.
And a doctor to admit they're
wrong. Like, me? A doctor? How dare thee? And so seeing that gave me hope back then. And so the fact that we have people like you that are now enforcing that even more further, I think is great, you know, because it's one thing to see a doctor get curious, but when you have people that are actively going in and saying, no, we need to continue this and not just leave it as a, I was curious kind of thing. It's like, you're on the right path, but you need to continue. Yeah, exactly.
And
you know?
they really are coming around. I don't know if you had just seen this circulating, and it's another thing I can share with you. UNM is asking for moms that are using cannabis.
I just saw that. You're right.
To go ahead and use the Leafly app and put in reports and everything. And I am so excited to see that data.
Me too. Because UNM actually does some really great studies.
They really do. They have a whole, and they're someone we've been in contact with being able to really do some programs and things with them because they want to know what's going on with cannabis. They're seeing it being used. The reservations are really backing them with getting the data in place. And so I'm really excited to see what they do.
Me too. You know, and us being at forefront of that is kind of cool too. Not gonna lie.
Having, like, it's really cool.
Yeah, I'm like, that's actually kind of cool.
See that data first. And
exactly.
Be something that we can do something with.
Definitely. You know, I'll keep you guys, you know, in the know when that data comes out and everything. I just saw that maybe 2 days ago.
Yeah,
like they
it's just now starting out. So it'll be a little while, but I've been sharing it left and right and getting it to every mom I know and every expecting family I can think of. Everybody.
Well, tag me on the next one and I'll share it and everything.
You got it.
So that way, you know, there's expecting moms on my page and stuff like that all the time. But that's great. You know, is there anything else that you want to share for, you know, on this episode? Because I mean, I don't want to give away everything, you know.
No, next episode we'll touch on the breastfeeding and some of that postpartum, but I think here we've covered a lot here. Again, we have our nonprofit starting up, and anyone who has questions, I do recommend. We provide that counseling service for moms experiencing any kind of cannabis use and they have questions. That's a service we provide for free. Yeah. So anybody who has questions, you're just looking for someone to talk to, we'll make sure that info is all included here for the comment section and here in the description so you guys can reach out. You should never have to have money in order to get answers for something like this.
I appreciate that.
And so we really have we've been very lucky to have the support we have to make that possible. And so whatever this community needs, you know, we're really, whatever else you can recommend to what the needs that you see with these moms, you know, because it's getting more prominent. Yeah. And same for the dispensaries. I have had dispensaries reach out because they're getting the questions and having pregnant women come in and ask, and same for that. So know that if you are a dispensary owner out there, you're listening to this, or you're a manager, we do provide that as well. We provide training for your staff and we provide support so that if you are getting some of those, or you just want to make sure that you have a little bit more of a medical-based training, we provide that training as well. You know, I think it'd be a good idea to have I want to say seminar, but like a huge thing with a bunch of dispensaries together with their employees. Let me know if you want to work on that together. We can get it started. I think we should. And let us know, like, in the comments too, if that's something you guys are interested in. Show us how much you'd be interested in having that as a resource. Yeah, definitely. 100%. I think that would be 100% something this community would love. Me too, because, you know, having the mass education, I think, would be great. Everybody gets all the information at the same time. They can ask their questions, because you're going to get the same questions a lot. Oh, yeah. Oh, we do. Yeah. But it's okay. No question can be asked too many times, and no question is dumb, especially when it comes to this. There is no dumb questions. This is not readily available information, so do not feel bad, silly, or dumb for coming forward.
Definitely.
I've had to hunt for the information. It's not like I just knew it.
You did the hard work.
I've been training for this for years. Don't worry.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shay, for sharing this with me.
Thank you so much.
Next week, we'll dig in a little bit deeper about, like after the kid comes out, or, maybe just before, because I know that can be kind of challenging for certain people.
Yeah.
The people I've known, my relatives, even the last few days before they have the kid is kind of just rough.
It's hard.
Yeah,
and getting ready, and it's very stressful, and you don't know what's going to happen. And yeah, we can have a lot of conversation.
Definitely. So make sure you guys, tune in next week for that. We're not done for the episode today, but make sure you guys tune in for that episode. Like I said, this is a 2-series part, and I appreciate you so much, sharing all this knowledge and like giving or sharing the knowledge that you went out of your way to find.
Absolutely.
Because this is information that I don't even have. I dig into stuff a lot. So I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the knowledge. Is there anything that you want to share about what you're doing before we move on to the last topic?
Really, just that we're excited. Get excited for us. You're going to see us in the community a lot. We are going to be working on some big projects at the end of the year, some big gatherings, and any other questions you have around birth, conception, breastfeeding, or anything postpartum cannabis-wise, reach out to us. We've got you.
Definitely.
You don't have to do it alone.
Where can they find you?
So you can find us at Birth and Babes. You can send us an email at birthandbabesnm@gmail.com, or you can reach us at our phone number, which is 575-642-0503.
Oh, you guys got a phone number. Hell yeah.
Got us the phone number. Woohoo.
So yeah, if you guys are curious, need help or anything, please reach out to them. No cost to you. And this is all about harm reduction. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Happy to do it.
Heck yeah. So let's move on to the very last topic. And this one I wanted to talk about because it seemed important, but at the same time, we're getting a lot of recognition here in New Mexico, and I want to at least give us a high five, a pat on the back. So we created something interesting in New Mexico when we legalized cannabis in 2021. We didn't do what a lot of other states have done at the time, and that includes cheaper licenses, open licenses. We didn't allow local jurisdiction as much power as other states did. I still think we gave them too much power, but we'll dig into that a little bit more. We did a lot of great things. We expanded the medical program before we went legal on top of that too. And today it's actually been nothing but a favor to us because with the Schedule 3 stuff, we're pretty much almost the light switch in general of going. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of stuff that they still have to figure out that they haven't told us yet. But from what I'm understanding, New Mexico's set themselves up pretty well when we made sure that our medical program was stabilized and the recreational followed a couple of years after. Because we changed the medical cannabis laws around 2018, 2019, and then in 2021 is when we actually legalized it, and 2022 is when the adult sales started. We did such a great job, and actually we even have consumption lounges. That's one thing I really want to mention too, is we have consumption lounges, and not many states actually have those, which is unfortunate. They have this idea, and even some lawmakers here in New Mexico have this idea that cannabis is meant for home and you're not meant to be out and about. It's weird. It's a weird stance to have, and that comes from the prohibition days, of us having no other choice but to grow indoors and to smoke indoors. So now they want to keep us that way and to keep everything together and not out, whatever. So other states are kind of struggling right now. You got Michigan, they're kind of dealing with too high of taxes, too much supply. You have Colorado, they're dealing with stagnation. They're stagnant as shit. Denver is, oversaturated while the rest of the state is kind of, bare. I've told you guys before where my dad's from in Colorado. I have to go to the next county over because the county that my family lives in, they banned it. It's so stupid. Yeah, it's dumb. And so you have stuff like that going on. And then you have states like Washington, who was the first state to legalize it. They don't even have lounges yet. And it's overtaxed and, it's a little ridiculous, and their medical program kind of suffers. A lot of these other states don't have reciprocity either, like we, and I think Maine has reciprocity too as well, and a couple other states. But most of them don't have what we have, where if you're from Texas and you have a medical card, you can purchase here, or whatever other state. And so finally we're getting some recognition because MJ Biz magazine, they did an article on us on how well we're doing and what kind of industry we've put out and everything. And I thought that was great, and I read it, and don't get me wrong, like I didn't agree with everything in the article. They're not living here in New Mexico, so they don't know about the struggles that we have, but I thought that was cool. They even mentioned that we kind of get forgotten about and we get overlooked. And to be honest, these days I'm kind of glad.
us do a lot.
Yeah.
Let us be.
Yeah, they just kind of let us be. They forget we're here. Yeah, they kind of just, we get to experiment a lot.
Which is great.
It is. It's great. And, we've created a great program due to that. We saw what these other states did. We pretty much sat on the sidelines for 10 years and we said, okay, that's going on. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. But we still ended up fucking it up. And I don't mean, we did a California mistake, or I'm going back on, supporting open licensing. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, for all the great things that we did, we also did some not so great things, and we're paying for it now. But that was going to happen. You can't create something new and make it perfect the first time. It's never going to happen. Like we all know baking, right? The first time you baked a cake, did you do great? I don't know. Like I didn't do great. I burnt it. Yeah, I burnt it. I think for the very first time it came out runny as hell. Like I'm going to make those mistakes. And even if you follow the recipe directly, you can still make mistakes.
Right, exactly.
And it comes with experience. And so we're finding out those things now, what we did right and what we did wrong. I love the fact that we have lounges. I love the fact that we have open licenses. I love the fact that we're pretty much a fair and free market here in New Mexico. But what I don't like is that we allowed them to increase our taxes every year now. It's actually next month, our taxes are increasing another 1%. So it'll be a total of 22% in taxes. And that's not going to stop, I think, until 2028. Yeah, so we're going to be increasing taxes for a couple more years now. I don't like that we did that. I think it was a mistake. It's something that I've been trying to push for us to fix every year during the legislative session, but the state doesn't want to lose that money.
No, absolutely not.
They've told us that several times. And every time we try to go fix it, like, oh, we already did the budget. We would have to go in and redo the budget. Just so happened to happen that way. I don't like that they did that. I actually don't like that they did give the cities more power than I think they should have. They can ban 24-hour sales. They can ban drive-thrus. Outdoor consumption is what most of them banned. Most places you can't smoke anything outside. I think those were mistakes, and they have led to us not being able to progress as much as we should at this point. We should have outdoor cannabis events. We should have consumption lounges where you can go and enjoy the outdoor New Mexico and smoke. We have a beautiful state, beautiful scenery, beautiful weather.
And beautiful opportunities for having huge open areas where it's not going to be in your face.
Exactly.
Business.
Maybe it's a little more further out from where the housing is, because you're allowed that flexibility. They did give us, don't get me wrong, we have way more flexibility than most states.
Sure.
I will give us that. We have way more flexibility, but we could really show these other states how it's done if we had even more flexibility. Because a lot of the strictness that we do have comes from stigma. There's no real fact or
it's the
reason.
harm reduction conversation all
Exactly.
over again.
Yeah.
If you would give us the space to make it safe, we could do a whole lot more.
Yeah.
But without the room to make it safe, then it's just a problem.
Definitely. And, I wanted to have this conversation because since we are getting some recognition now and people are starting to look at us, because I have buddies from other states, Miggy, I've had him on the show several times, shout out to Miggy and, Cannabis Legalization Network or News. I always mess up News or Network. They're on YouTube. Go check them out. Great stuff. Even him, every time I talk to him about it, he's like, dude, you guys did it right, man. We don't even have that. I actually was on a video call with him in Sunland Park at Astro Buds.
Okay.
And I was showing him around, and actually he knows Colt DeMorris. And so I gave Colt the phone. I said, go show him around, dude. So Colt showed him the whole facility, and he was like, this is crazy, dude. He's like, you guys did it so right. So when you have people from other states, especially the first state to legalize, telling us that we did something right, I got to give us kudos. I do it all the time. I'm like, we did something great. But we do need to hunker down on the things that we didn't do so great on. And some other states have made these same mistakes too. It's just we didn't do our due diligence enough to go even further to make sure we didn't do them too. What are some things that maybe you think on the top of your head where you think we could have done a little bit better, I guess?
I think there should have been a better bridge with the providers and the medical and the rec understanding.
Oh, thank God. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah.
There was this big, once it went rec, they had no more obligation to do the work they needed to for their medical patients.
Yeah.
I think there was a little bit of okay, it's rec. I can just say, go give it a try. It's legal now. Have you tried weed? Have you tried smoking kind of thing? And it could be very much a lax thing for them of being like oh, I'm not condoning it. I just need to know for your history. And it became less of a concern of a medical standpoint.
Yeah, 100%.
And I really feel like that was also something the state could have done a lot better with. the CCD and the DOH are already the same department.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of stuff they could have done with education and getting these providers up to date with knowing even safety things and knowing med interactions or knowing contraindications that were your hard no for things. But it was kind of, I think it got kind of skipped.
Yeah, it did, and
it was really disappointing to see from the medical side.
I could see that actually, and it's probably frustrating at the same time because you're going to have to fix that shit later on.
100%, because who's going to suffer?
Exactly.
The patient.
Yeah, the patient.
And that was something we saw with DOH when we did the cannabis education. Is DOH wanted the information. It was just how it was being presented, and it was it really became a moment of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And making sure the right verbiage was there. And you're not actively saying to use, but you're not actively not saying to use.
Yeah.
My whole program, I don't know if I shared with you, the whole program was approved, but the one note I had was you didn't include enough about safety and storage.
Yeah, you did tell me about that.
And I was like, okay, I'll expand on that slide. Like, that's your commentary. So I think the priorities are still a little mismanaged.
Yes, I agree. And a lot of, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, just with the mentioning of cannabis and porn shops not being able to have the same benefits as other businesses. And that's ridiculous.
These are still, and that's just it too. There's so much stigma around the product that we forget about. This is still a business.
Exactly.
This is still a medication. This is still somebody's livelihood who's servicing a clientele.
Yeah. Or someone's life in general who uses this for well-being, or for their health.
And there's cities like, Cruces, we're lucky. We have an abundance right now still of dispensaries. But what about these rural areas where they maybe have one or two? Maybe only one is providing medical doses for somebody, and we have a break-in, we have a fire or something. Now what?
Yeah.
Now we have an entire community who's suffering because we've lost our only resource.
And most of the consumers these days are elderly. Or
they're disabled.
Yes.
And these are people who already are struggling with transportation. They might already be struggling with finances and accessibility. And we have so few delivery services for THC because that's another hurdle and things it's very difficult to get everything together for. So we're just seeing what I feel should have made something really accessible for people and really get to a place where our people who were using it heavily, elderly, disabled, had priority access. We're not seeing that.
Right. Yeah.
We just don't see that at all.
We don't. And at the very beginning, when legalization happened, we had the start of it when they were providing the separate line for patients and bringing patients in first. That was the start of it, but then they stopped, and it never went beyond that.
It didn't.
And that's unfortunate. And I think what happened was people saw dollar signs. Then they said, well, I'm making more money from the recreational side, and the numbers show it when you look at the sales.
Oh, yeah.
The rec numbers up here and the medical, and every now and then you'll have a dispensary where it's different. But for the most part, the rec sales trump their medical, which we knew was going to happen. But
of course,
what I hoped would have happened was they saw that and said, well, we have an opportunity to provide even more attention to these patients. We don't have that many. That means I can provide them with a lot of attention. Exactly. If I have 5,000 medical patients coming in, I understand if you can't give them, individual whatever. But if you have 200, maybe 50, whatever,
and really, those are the numbers we're looking at. For every single dispensary in Cruces, it's 1 in every 20. Person who comes in that's going to be a medical patient.
So it's even lower than the random number I gave. Yeah.
And that's hard because then they're going to the only person they know is going to have information, and that's just not what we're setting up for.
Yeah. And, it sets a lot of people up for failure and to, and some of these people are new users. And so they may misuse cannabis some way, mistakenly, and never do it again.
Right. Having that negative experience. And let's be real that the bud tenders deserve better too.
I agree.
Our bud tenders do not deserve to be thrown on the front lines the way that we're throwing them out there and expecting them to answer these questions and be a guide for these people, and then they get trouble.
And
they've given bad advice. Oh, well, and then it's in trouble, and now the business is getting bad reviews and things, and it's also avoidable. Yeah,
it is, and we're worried about the wrong things, and, stuff like what we're going through really shows that, I do thank you so much, MJ Biz, for the great article. But I wanted to talk about, the bad stuff too, and stuff where we kind of fell short.
Really?
And, our medical side is one of them. Don't get me wrong, we strengthened it. We have medical patients that, can get their cannabis pretty much anywhere in the state now, and you're not really subject to, certain parts of the state. But I feel we didn't do enough.
No, and especially with the resources we did have. We had the opportunity to really do some big things, and again, I think it was just not prioritized.
Yeah. It was
rec really took off.
Yeah, it was money over the patients. And, that's one reason why I want to talk about this, to remind people that, this is only possible because of the medical cannabis patients in the first place. Without them, this would never happen.
Advocacy,
exactly.
Everything, their push for it to be available is why we got rec at all.
Yeah. I mean, Essie, we have a award show for her every year, and some of you don't even know who she is. Yeah. But she's one of the reasons why I'm sitting here right now with this show. She is one of the founders of the medical cannabis program here in New Mexico. She was one of the first patients to get out there and really speak her mind and fight. Until the day she passed. She was a huge cannabis advocate. And it's people like that we have a legacy to live on with. And without those people, we wouldn't be here. So why would we forget about the medical patients and the medical side? It's another thing I'm going to touch on this too, is something we didn't do right. I think the CCD got too much of the medical program. And
I agree.
Yeah, I think that we actually gave the CCD too many priorities, even with production. Like, they shouldn't be dealing with production. That should be Department of Ag. The Ag department.
And they should have left all of the cannabis health stuff in DOH.
I agree, 100%. And change the law, expand it, whatever, but leave the medical decisions to the medical people.
Yes.
The CCD is actually in charge of our adequate supply, or how much medical patients are allowed to purchase, and I don't see that right, because it should be a medical entity making that decision, not a recreational one. And to be honest, the CCD has too much on their plate. Many people have told me all the time, oh, they're too busy, they can't do this. I was like, well, why the fuck did we give them so many jobs?
Yeah.
Like, why didn't we break this up where Department of Ag already runs the hemp industry? Why not have them run production for the rec side? That only makes sense. Right. Why are we, bringing them, cutting them so thin when the DOH could do a majority of what they're doing now?
Yes, and what they were doing before there was a CCD.
Exactly, they're already doing it.
They already had it under control, and that was my thing with when we met with them. I was like, what, we're having to have this huge meeting. So we had everyone from DOH, and we still had to have people from CCD. So it was this massive meeting that could have been an email.
Exactly.
But it was like, we all had to just get all together for it. Yeah. Because it's the bureaucracy.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting it all together. And I feel like they made it so complicated, as is the way, right? So that it would be impossible to navigate.
Yeah, and that's why that's where my predictions come from, y'all. When I do make a prediction about the government, it's because of fuckery like that. Gino, thumbs up.
Can I say it?
Yeah.
Can I say it?
Yeah.
That's when you, Michael Spear, when you let the fuckery begin.
And we did, when we legalized it, the fuckery did begin. It's taken some time for some of these other things to show up and for us to kind of be like, oh, that was kind of fucked up. We shouldn't have done that. Like, I don't think the DOH should really be telling patients how much they should be consuming, because that just, the CCD, the DOH should be the one doing that. Yeah. That shouldn't be in the CCD's ballpark. They have so much to deal with licensing, with enforcement, and don't get me started on that one. I think us giving them the enforcement when we did was probably a bad idea, because now it's not doing anything, and only the smaller businesses are getting punished right now. Yeah. And we have someone in RLD, the head of RLD, not even CCD, who doesn't really even like cannabis. He's going after the packaging. Yeah. The inspectors are being very aggressive and treating us poorly.
Like this. Yeah.
And that's something I feel like we shouldn't have allowed, but we did. It's going to take time for us to fix all of this. It's going to take probably years, probably a good 5 years for us to fix a few more things. I feel like it was
going to be 5 years out the gate to really settle into what the pattern was going to be and what we were going to see for the outcomes of what was set up.
Yeah.
It'll be another 5 years to fix it.
Yep.
Another 5 years after that to work out the kinks.
Yeah, exactly. So. And that's only if we continue to fight. Now, I can only do so much, Shay can only do so much, and every other advocate that you see fighting, we can only do so much. We need the help of you all, the patients, the operators, everybody cannabis related. We need all of you to continue to fight. My voice is only one voice on this huge state that we have. There's only 2 million people in New Mexico, but I am one person versus 2 million. That's a lot. So I need you guys to do your due diligence to ensure that you're fighting to ensure that this industry continues. Be it fighting over regulation, which I think was another thing we did wrong, was too much over regulation. BioTrack is trash. Sorry, it is what it is.
What it is.
And it's flawed and has caused a lot of issues in New Mexico. It's one of the reasons why out-of-state product was so easily to get into the New Mexico product is because BioTrack was almost set up.
So gappy.
Yeah, and it was almost done on purpose. You know, I've spoken to the guy who did the code, and you could pretty much pay him to, you know, tell you to do whatever you want. And so, you know, that's a flawed system if you tell me. It's up to you all to make sure that this industry gets better and continues to get better. I can only do so much. Yeah, we saved drive-thrus at one time, but we're not going to change these other laws with just me going over there talking to the legislators. You need to talk to your representatives, local, city, whatever, especially city. Cities has more power than federal government really on you, because the city is the one who creates all these little weird rules that you have to abide by within the city. You know, like, for cannabis examples, like I said before, 24-hour sales, that's through the city. How far dispensaries are from each other, that's through the city. It can be 0 feet, or it can be, I think, up to 300 feet. You know, that's up to the cities. And so it's up to you to make sure you're fighting. Show up to city council hearings, show up to county stuff, show up to state stuff. These days, you can show up online. And you can make your public comment. A lot of times during the legislative session, I am making my public comments remotely from down here in Las Cruces because I can't make it up to Santa Fe every day. You know, so there's ways to do it and ways to fight. It's not just you open up the business, you're good to go, and you're just going to react. You got to fight to continue this industry. And if we want to continue people to recognize us and to give us the kudos that we've been getting, you know, like huge, you know, cannabis magazines giving us a shout out like the way they did. That was a long article. If you guys have a chance to read it, read it. It's actually very thorough, and they go through all the different points. They even mentioned lounges.
Which was crazy.
Yeah, right. I didn't think they would.
I was taken back. I really was, because that's not something I usually touch on for something like that.
Yeah, me too. You know, and I was like, oh, they're probably not going to talk about, oh shit, they talked about lounges. I was like, oh, wow.
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, damn. And, you know, it's kind of like we're the diamond in the rough is kind of the way the article made it sound. And to be honest, we kind of are. But we do have our issues that we need to fix before we continue on, because these other states are looking at us, and some of them are making some of the changes that we made initially. The lounges, that is something that a lot of states are starting to adapt, because they realize that that's a huge gap. And once you guys actually realize that it's hospitality, not retail, we'll do so much better.
Right? Once they can put that piece together, we're going to fly through.
Yeah.
It'll be perfect.
Once you guys figure out that it's even in that article, it mentioned hospitality, you know, the lounge being hospitality, which I thought was funny. I was like, right there, it says it. So yeah, once we figure out that it's not retail, it's hospitality, I think the lounges would get even better, because I think Astrobuds, that's the recipe for success here in New Mexico. You know, great atmosphere, food, different ways to consume cannabis. I mean, they have the mixed drinks, the mocktails. I go and get a michelada a lot, you know, or I'll get a margarita, but, you know, it's infused with, you know, 5 milligrams to 10, you know, I think 5 is the max you can get per drink. You can even do it to a soda.
Which is
you know,
so fun.
Yeah, it's great. You know, in that article, they even mentioned that, you know, one of the other guys, they have a lounge, and he wasn't aware that, you know, some other places are doing it. He's like, yeah, I think we're the only place in the state that you can get infused soda. I was like, you can't at Astrobuds, but I love the fact that you can. You know, like, it's something that's an option. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we do need to change, but it's going to be up to you all to make sure that it happens. Not just the businesses. I'm talking the advocates, the patients, especially the patients. You guys are the ones that they listen to a lot. You know, especially when it comes to the medical side, because we deal with this every day. I'm a patient myself too. I have been since 2013 here in New Mexico. So it's up to me as well. And I try to do my due diligence, but I can only do so much. But yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that again, to drill it into you guys that it's up to you to make sure that we continue this trend of doing some cool shit. Because I know being in it, it sucks. But when you look what else is out there, we have done something significantly better and game-changing, really. And places are starting to notice it. Yes, it sucks right now, and it's going to suck for a while because of the way that it happened. And I've said this before, the way that they passed it was a Hail Mary to start out with. It took 2 special sessions, and then even then, it barely passed. So I was even shocked when it passed. I was like, oh, shit. And then I started reading it, and I was like, I think they don't realize how dope this bill actually is.
I think they're tired of it.
Yeah, I was like, oh. So, yeah, I want to give us hats off to everybody in the industry. We created something cool, but to continue it, we're going to need more fighting. We're going to need more people voicing, you know, what we need and what needs to happen. I need to see you guys more at the CCD hearings, the state stuff, and the city stuff. You know, that's the only way we're going to get it done. So that's everything I have for this. Thank you guys for listening to my rant on my TED Talk.
Same.
We'll be back next week with Shay again joining us to continue this great conversation. And I'm actually looking forward to getting into the breastfeeding part too as well.
Yeah,
I've been very curious about that. Yeah. And there's some great new information that came out. So make sure you guys check out this episode. And of course, next week when we talk about this, I'll be back again for another episode of Ask Chad Grassy Logic. Make sure you like, subscribe, whatever you got to do to stay in the know. All right, guys, shoots.
But on.
Grassy.